My name is Tim Godby. I'm the Educational Recovery Director for the Kentucky Department of Education. And my job is to support the 35 low-performing schools in Jefferson County. And with me in that task are 35 educational recovery staff members who support their schools. My main purpose is to make sure that those 35 educational recovery staff individuals feel supported, feel connected, and are communicated with on a regular basis. Again, we want to make sure that we mobilize and equip them to do the job that they need to do in those schools. And so one of the things that we're constantly looking to do is to improve how we do our work. How do we ensure that educational recovery work is more connected among the team and that there are high levels of communication that run throughout?
Hi, I'm Julie Carwell, an ER with the Central Region. We are always looking to continue to improve and stay connected, and you heard earlier from Tim about how our journey began. So, with that being said, whenever I first was hired, there was only 21 CSI schools. I was an ER placed at a school with 2 other ERs, which made it really good because I was able to stay connected every day with a partner. And at the end of that school year, then scores came out and we went from 21 CSI schools to 35 CSI schools with no additional ERs being hired. Mr. Godby then placed us at 2 schools with a partner, and we were servicing 2 schools. At the end of that year, the Plus Delta, we used the continuous improvement tool. All ERs were asked to complete a Plus Delta as well as the principals. ERs liked being with a partner, however, found it difficult to service 2 schools. Principals also gave the feedback about how they loved the ER work and help and wanted it daily in their building instead of it being split between 2 schools. So therefore brought upon our work of just being in 1 school by ourselves. However, we could not lose our collaborative partnership with other ERs, so that started our network improvement communities, our NIC groups.
When I came on to the Central ER team, it was at an odd time. It was in the middle of the year, and one of the things that I found out very quickly was I had a huge learning curve that I had to attend to. Tim kind of threw a book at me that was called Learning to Improve and was like, well, our team is already several chapters in and we have a meeting next week, so you can kind of have that caught up at that time. And so I immediately jumped into the book, and there were a couple of things that really stood out to me early on that really, it spoke to me. So one of the things was this idea of a network improvement community where the ultimate goal was really accumulating this base of high leverage standard work processes. And it was something that we could all learn from and go to. And so the administrator in me automatically went to, well, how do you make this happen, like logistically? And there was this other little blurb that was in the book that started talking about this idea of a hub and communication and resources. And so I just kind of clung to that and just was thinking long term, because if any of this is going to grow and you're really going to improve at scale the way that we wanted to, you were going to have to keep accessing the information that had already been learned. And so at that time, you know, I'm only a month to in, and the whole process as far as getting the diagnostic reports back, that was overwhelming. And so I had this idea that kept going on in the back of my mind that we were going to have to do this thing, but we were in the middle of that very important stage in the year. At the end of the year, I knew that in order for this to really take root, that we were going to have to kind of change the way that we were operating. So I threw this idea at Tim and said, you know, we really need a knowledge management system. We need a strong communication system in order for people to access the information long term, especially people that came in like myself. You know, I wasn't privy to all the learning that had been taking place over the course of a couple of years. And so I would just dig back into old agendas and try to access information like that. So when I was looking at information, it wasn't chronologically, it was more by topic. And I knew, just as the case is with any organization, you are going to continually have new people coming into the group. So for me, it was really important, not only for my own learning, but to start creating a system that was more accessible in that way, where the communication was very clear, it was very strong, and it was going out to absolutely everybody. Everybody saw the same message, but that at no matter what point in time, whatever the need arose, that you could go back and access that information. So the whole idea of this knowledge management system kind of manifested itself into what we call the website today. And it was a way to cross-reference information that was only located at one point in the ER drive.
So when I joined the Central ER team, it was in the middle of a pandemic and I had to work from home. So that was a really interesting experience. And as I joined the team, Tim gave me a book, Learning to Improve, that Sarah had mentioned before. And basically, the team had already done a book study and they were already really involved in the tools and the learning. And so I'm joining in the middle of this kind of awkward situation, working from home. I don't even meet the people that I work with. And I have this book, and Tim asked me to join the Hub team. He said, we're going to work on the website. We're going to make sure that it is a good communication piece. You'll be kind of a representative from the high school group. And so as we went through that, and as we went through the site and we were connecting communication and things like that, we realized that there was a need with the groups when we started to talk about communication and how the groups would be structured. And so we used a lot of the Learning to Improve tools and improvement science tools to explore those ideas of how the groups would be structured. It started with an empathy interview, and really the empathy interview began as a way to explore further how we're communicating as a team, but what came out of it was this need for new groups. And so it led to some new group structures. And we've used a lot of the continuous improvement science tools, being empathy interviews, empathy maps to kind of find out what is important to the ER staff, journey mapping, plus deltas, different things to explore these concepts. And for me as a new ER, again in this sort of unique situation, it has just improved my learning tenfold. It's really learning by doing. I don't know that I would be where I am if it hadn't been for that experience. I've really been able to apply it to what I'm doing at my school at Shawnee, exploring some new ideas of sort of, we're gonna try some new things with EPD and see how it goes, and this sort of trial and error and quick iterations of PDSA, and I think it's been really impactful to our work.
After we completed the empathy interviews with the ERs, we went through a mapping activity where we analyzed the data from the interviews and we sorted it into what the ER said, did, thought, and felt during the interviews. And what this really did for us is it helped us to see some common themes in what ERs really wanted out of their groups. So the themes that we discovered were clarity, autonomy, support, authenticity, and collaboration. And once we realized that that was what they wanted, we went back to all of the NIC groups and we told them that they had the autonomy to change their groups to be whatever they needed it to be so that they could meet those goals. And in some cases, we had some very large groups, so we gave them the autonomy to split into smaller groups, whatever was going to help them meet their needs. A couple weeks after we started our new groups, we went back and we surveyed the ERs that were in the new groups, and we asked them how they were feeling about this new structure. All the feedback was really positive, which was awesome. There were still some issues around the clarity of the groups, but everyone felt like they were moving in the right direction with clarity, and so that felt really good. For me, being a part of this team and the process of doing the empathy interviews was really, really meaningful because it really helped me to focus on this idea of user-centeredness. And I know that I'll be able to take empathy interviews back to the work that I'm doing at Knight Middle School because it's just so important to get the input of the people actually at the center of the system that you're trying to fix. So this has really been relevant and meaningful work for me.
So from our empathy interviews, we also decided that we were going to need to address specific problems. And so we were able to create our focused improvement teams. Some examples of those focused improvement teams is this team here, our hub group. That is our way to address communications within our ER group. We have our Understanding by Design group that is helping teachers focus on designing lessons. And then we also have a common formative assessment group that is really targeting developing a common formative assessment bank for our elementary school teachers. So we were able to use the improvement science to give us a pathway to address specific problems within our larger group.
Like it was discussed before, when we did the empathy interviews, ERs expressed a desire for not only a level of support around just the work we were doing in schools, but also a separate avenue to continue that improvement science work. But there were really two desires that came out of those empathy interviews. So one being the improvement science work around a problem of practice or common aim that the schools had, and then also almost like a learning community, like a need for a learning community to address the professional learning needs of ERs. So we wanted to write the proposal to capture both of those types of groups that were separate from just the general support group. So for example, if you're thinking of PLCs, you could have a PLC group that's focused on a common aim among the schools where they're going to identify a change idea and test it and measure it and then maybe spread the results from school to school. Or a group that would be focused on PLCs that would be totally different, that would be focused on the professional learning of the ER for PLC work. So we really wanted to capture that in the proposal, and then we wanted it to be displayed on the website in a way almost like a bulletin board in a coffee shop, where people could kind of see what was going on with the different groups and the different needs that were going on, and be able to join in those groups. Like, hey, like I have that going on too, I want to join that group. And so it contributes to that sense of camaraderie among ERs, and then being able to tackle common problems. We had considered including times and things like that on the proposal form, but we left that off just to make sure that we address that express need in the empathy interview of autonomy among ERs. People want to be able, once those groups are formed around either a common problem or a common learning need, have the autonomy to choose how often and when they meet. But we also wanted to make sure that we had a way that the learning of whichever type of group it is, a learning group or a problem-focused group, we had a way to share that with common stakeholders like the schools that we support, our ER team, or possibly other ERs across the state. That's why we were really intentional to include what the share out of the results would be on the proposal form. So whether, it might be if you have investigated a change idea, it might be that you're sharing that out with other ERs that have that same problem, like, hey, here's a change idea that we tested that was proven effective, and we want to expand this to other schools and test it further to see if it works across the board in different settings. Or if it were an ER group that were focused on professional learning, if they do a deep dive into a professional topic, then they can share that out in our ER meetings, so everyone's learning from the deep dive that this small group took.
So it's been very neat to see how a group of committed individuals have come together, focused on a very clear purpose of making sure that our team has and demonstrates a high level of communication among the team, as well as being connected with one another in the work. We've come such a long way in those two areas, and I know with the implementation of improvement science and practicing those principles of being user-centered, at looking at our results for improvement, we'll continue to grow and improve as time goes on.